wasn't just a homeless person. He had people that cared about him. He had friends.
In a horrific killing that made national news, court records showed this man, Tyree Lincoln Smith, killed Gonzalez using an axe, then ate part of his body, here in a building on Brook Street in 2011.
He didn't deserve what was done to him.
I just want you guys to stop and think for a second about the premise of this particular story, as if, of course, you are in the victim's family. In 2011, one of your loved ones ends up being murdered. Not only is it a murder, but is it specifically a horrific murder that grabs the attention of the media, is still being talked about in true crime podcasts, because not only did the suspect in this particular case, Tyree Smith, kill your loved one, but he actually ate portions of his body, making it a cannibal killer story, meaning that your relative's story will be repeated time and time again by all these different various people with fascinations related to criminality. Now that happens all the way back in 2011. The suspect in that particular case is arrested. However, he's not convicted. He's found not guilty for reasons of insanity, but you are assured by the prosecutors, by the judge, by everyone involved that you're not going to have to worry about this individual anymore, because he is to be confined to a mental health hospital for 60 years. Fast forward to the year 2025, and all of a sudden, you have some new left-wing energy in the criminal justice system. All of a sudden, you have these new parole boards that are re-examining whether or not there's racial bias in these criminal justice cases, and they decide that that man who snapped, who killed and ate one of your relatives, has actually done enough in the psychiatric hospital, and now he will be released on a conditional basis back into the community. All of these stories get dredged back up into the media, they get thrown in your face, and you have to live with the idea that the promises that were made to you 14 years ago when this person was found not guilty for reasons of insanity have actually been for naught. They've actually been forgotten. Again, in a quarter of the time that this person was supposed to be confined to the hospital, they decided to do a turnaround and they're going to release them. And now you have to go to the local media in order to beg them to put pressure on the politicians to hold this dangerous criminal in captivity, because again, he's already been proven to be not mentally sound enough to not murder and then eat somebody that he murders. It's absolute madness out of the state of Connecticut, but we cannot be surprised because this has become very common in this new era of sympathy for the criminal and ignoring the existence of the victims. Now, we're going to get into this. We're going to break this down, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
And an update tonight to a disturbing story out of Bridgeport where a man was killed with an axe, then his killer ate part of his body. Our Frank Recchia has this exclusive update.
As the family spokesperson,
56-year-old Talitha Frazier of Bridgeport, speaking for the immediate family
from the day we left court,
of 35-year-old Angel Gonzalez, her brother-in-law.
We called him Toon Toon. That man was well loved by friends and family.
I think it's so telling that you can actually hear from the in-law of this particular victim, who is the family spokesperson, who is the person to interface with the media, that 14 years later, the emotions are still raw. 14 years later, they're still horrifically scarred by this particular crime against Mr. Gonzalez, who, like this woman said, and should be obvious and should go without saying, did not deserve this. He did not deserve to have these horrors inflicted on him, and the family did not deserve to be put in the national spotlight due to the actions of this individual. Now, to be clear, on this channel, we do actually respect the rulings of these courts. We understand that certain people are not mentally suitable for trial. They can go insane and all that. So in this particular case, I will emphasize again, even though he used the affirmative defense, which said that he did in fact commit this murder during the course of his trial, he also was arguing that he was insane at the time and therefore could not be held responsible. As we have talked about on this channel, maybe it's been the first time in a long time, in order to be convicted of an intent crime, you need what is called a mens rea, which is the evil intent, and actus rea. And when you are mentally insane, when you're crazy, when you're actually not able to formulate the rational basis for mens rea, all you have is actus rea, aka the evil act. And in this particular case, that's what the court found. However, they understood at the time time that this guy was a significant danger to society. That's why, as a part of him being adjudicated to be mentally ill, they said that he needed to go to a psychiatric facility for 60 years. But 4 weeks ago, we start hearing buzz in the state of Connecticut about this guy getting released, about the state saying, oh, he's all better, nothing to worry about, nothing to see here. And the family is going to get screwed over completely as this person is able to escape accountability for those actions in 2 ways. First of all, he didn't have to go to prison, and now, in addition to that, he doesn't even have to be in a mental hospital.
Smith found not guilty of murder by reason of insanity and committed to a state psychiatric hospital for 60 years.
I let my guard down.
But after only 10 years, he was found to be stable, then released back into the community in 2023. Staying at a group home in Waterbury.
So first of all, just right off the top, I made a bit of an error when I said that he served about a quarter of his time, which had been closer to 15 years. But according to this report, he's been out a little bit after 10 years after the conclusion of his trial, which, by the way, it makes perfect sense for the crime to occur in 2011 and for the ruling, the judgment, whatever the adjudication of the case to be concluded a couple of years later, because obviously our court system takes a long time. But yeah, it basically snuck up on these people. He's been out for a long time, and the family is advocating for him to stay in custody, to go back to the hospital. Living in a group home is absolutely not good enough for them, and this is completely understandable because, again, there are just less restrictions in the group home. Now, there's a number of reasons why the Connecticut Parole Board would have done this. They might have felt sympathy for the criminal. This is something that we see ideologically from the left wing time and time again. Again, all your sympathy goes to the innocent Beba Angel Cannibal Aladdin, who's just trying to feed himself when he axe murdered their relative and ended up eating parts of his body. But in addition to that, it can also be viewed as cheaper in order to have somebody go to a group home rather than have them in a full-fledged psychiatric hospital, which again is where he was supposed to be sent for 60 years. That was the original judgment, and they're already in violation of that judgment. Now, of course, they give this woman the opportunity to speak up at the victim impacts portion of the hearing.
They didn't take in consideration how we would feel.
An email obtained by News 12 Connecticut from the State Psychiatric Security Review Board sent to the victim's family shows they'll have a chance to give a victim impact statement when Smith goes before the board next month for a periodic assessment. Frazier says she'll be there to say she doesn't feel safe.
But the fact of the matter is, we already know the results of this because February 21st has already passed, and guess what? They didn't end up siding with her. We'll get into that a little bit later, but let's hear a little bit more from this spokesperson and what she feels should be done in this particular case.
But it's hard. It's hard not knowing if this man's going to pop up at our door, if he's going to pop up back on Brook Street. Is he going to take the ankle monitor off? We don't know, and it's something we have to think about.
More than a decade after the brutal killing of her loved one, Frazier with a message for the man who took his life.
You have to go back and do your time. My family is scared. I'm scared.
So look, obviously she expresses a fear that this individual will cut off his ankle monitor, possibly show up at their front door. But the fact of the matter is, we've seen time and time again with these criminal types, they don't even bother to cut off their ankle monitor. How many stories have we covered on this channel where somebody was under supervised release, they're not supposed to go into certain areas, and then they're rearrested, and then the location data from their ankle monitor is used against them in order to tie them to a much more serious crime. Now, of course, you don't get much more serious than the homicide that this person already committed. You don't get much more serious than the cannibalism post-homicide. Obviously, it was incredibly brutal and disgusting, so we don't expect him to do something that is more crazy, more violent than he did, but repeating that behavior, or even marginally trying to attempt to repeat that behavior, can have devastating consequences. And whether or not he's going to target this family individually, it's not really the point of me talking about this story. The fact of the matter is, he's out there. They may have said that he's stabilized, but there's a reason why they wanted him to be confined for a much larger period of time. And while I'm sympathetic to the idea that because he did not have the evil intent, because he was not mentally sound enough in order to formulate intent, the fact of the matter is, this is a dangerous individual, and we don't know how much the group therapy or any of that stuff is going to nerf his dangerous tendencies.
Thank you. A man accused of killing and eating another person in Bridgeport being granted a conditional release. Tyree Smith killed Angel Gonzalez with an axe in 2011 and ate part of the victim's body. Smith was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sentenced to 60 years in a psychiatric hospital. He was then transitioned to a group home in 2023. Smith's conditional release will happen in phases, beginning with supervised periods of temporary leave in the community.
So yeah, after this woman made her plea on the local news, after this case ended up getting attention, after pressure was put on the board that looks over this particular case, we ended up not only just keeping him in their group home, we end up doing a thing where we're starting to reintroduce him into the community without supervision for him to then return to the group home periodically. So again, this person is transitioning to be somebody that is going to be integrated into the Bridgeport community, and I really genuinely feel terrible for the next person to come across him when that treatment doesn't work, when his violent tendencies reemerge, because obviously the cost has already been paid in blood, it's already been paid in somebody's life, but this is how we operate in the United States of America now. And oftentimes on this channel, we talk about people who have committed crimes but haven't really escalated to the point where they've proven to be an absolute danger to other people around them, and how they get released over and over again, time and time again. And we think that we need to change the mental health standards in order to make sure that those people can be incapacitated before they take somebody's life. But in this case, you have somebody who's been adjudicated mentally ill. They've been adjudicated mentally ill after they killed and ate somebody. But guess what? The system still ends up siding with the criminal. The system still ends up deciding that this person deserves the right to be reintroduced into society this early, by the way. And now what we're seeing is that despite fears from the victims, despite fears from the community, despite the original sentence, the original time that he was supposed to be in a mental hospital and be confined in that hospital, they're giving him more and more freedom. They're releasing him little by little, and eventually this guy is just going to be out on the streets without any supervision. And when he reoffends, you're not going to hear any of the politicians that are responsible for this change in policy take any accountability. The board that is supervising him that are like, I'm sure he's perfectly fine. Let's do this test case because we really want to demonstrate to the world that even the most dangerous, the most heinous of the murderers that we come across, we can rehabilitate in the state of Connecticut. And of course, they say that, they end up performing these actions, but we all know that as soon as this backfires, as soon as this fails, nobody's going to take accountability for it. Nobody is going to say, oh, we messed up, we bungled this, we're responsible for this. They're just going to pass the buck to somebody else. And again, I want you to remember the emotion on the faces of the family members. I want you to think about what you would do if this was your family member, if they were killed by this person, if they were eaten in part by this person, if you end up taking them to trial, you end up taking them to court, and you get a not guilty by reason of insanity, but you are assured by the courts and everybody that's involved that everything's going to be fine, because guess what? We're still going to hold this person for 60 years. We're still going to make sure that even though we're saying he needs mental health treatment, that he's not going to be out in order to relapse, in order to attack people again. Well, guess what? Promise made in this case, promise broken. Now look, to be 100% clear, I don't want to beat up too much on Tyree Smith. He was adjudicated to be mentally ill at trial as an affirmative defense against a homicide charge, and that is incredibly difficult to pull off. But what I'm pointing out is that the system is catered to the criminals. The system is catered to the mentally ill, and there are consequences for that. The victim in this case was a vulnerable individual. He was described as being a homeless person. He may have been suffering from a drug addiction or something of the sort, and he was butchered by this person and eaten by him, and his family, his life, they're thrown asunder, even though he's clearly and obviously the victim, while Tyree Smith is just considered the person that we all need to care for, we all need to show love for, we all need to show empathy for, and I'm not here for that. Again, I know people experience mental illnesses, and I want to treat them, I want to address them, but that only goes up to the point where you present yourself as a serious danger to other people. We can't have it. We can't allow it, or at least that's my opinion. I want to know what you guys think about this, though, down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Tyree Smith being released. Till next time.